Okay, so before the screen turns up, let me just give you a brief introduction about what I do. So you've been listening to a lot of scientists so far. I would say that I'm not a scientist, but increasingly people are starting to say that scientists are not just the people who are in the lab working on experiments, but they are people who think scientifically, who are writing about science. As important as doing science is communicating your science, because unless the scientist tells the world about what they're doing, then there will never be any. They'll just be sitting in their lab making breakthroughs, but who is going to take the treatment to the hospital? Who's going to bring these applications to our doorstep, right? So science communication is as important an aspect of science as it is doing science. So I do something very interesting, which I think you should all also think of as a career, because when I was in school, I loved science, I loved maths, and I even studied science for 5 years after school and college. But I soon realized that I enjoyed talking about science and explaining science a little more than being in a laboratory and working out experiments. I really enjoyed teaching my friends. I really enjoyed referring different books and drawing diagrams and understanding concepts. But I didn't really know what to do with it, because all I knew was that after school you have to choose whether you want to do your BSc or your engineering or medicine, if you're a science student. But a few years down the line, I realized that there's another field called science journalism. So journalism, I think all of you will know what journalism is. What do you think of when I say journalism? News reporters. News. So basically, a journalist is somebody who gets the news out. It can be through newspapers, it can be through TV and everything. And this news is any kind, right? There's politics, there's sports. News happens in every possible stream, crime, everything. Similarly, there's also science news. Every day there are hundreds of papers being published in different scientific journals. And each of these papers, when I talk about papers, publishing each paper is basically a small new discovery. So a science journalist's job is to look through these thousands of papers that are coming out in a week and decide what is news and communicate it in a way that lay people, non-scientists, are able to understand. So when I discovered that there was such a field, I thought it was ideal for me. And that's when I started writing about science, and now you'll see a lot more science journalists. Most newspapers have a page about science, dedicated to science. All that is being written by science journalists. So there's one particular project that I started with my colleague Ashima, who's right now in Delhi doing a similar talk. So she and I thought about something, okay? So if I ask you to name for me 3 Indian scientists, can you do that? Okay, anyone else? Okay, S.N. Bose. Okay, anybody noticing anything here? Okay, so let's try to think of some women. Janaki Ammal. Where did you hear of Janaki Ammal? Anyone else? You remember? Nobody you remember? 3 people who spent 3 hours talking to you in the morning? Nobody thought of those names, huh? See, there are scientists all around, but somehow we don't remember their names, and I don't blame you. This was happening to me also, and Ashima and I realized that, oh my God, we don't know any women scientists. Is that because there are no women scientists? So we started, the light off, light. So we started traveling. We started traveling around India, going to laboratories where science is being done, and these are all over the country. Even in your own neighborhood, if you look carefully, you'll probably see some laboratories. It could be a forensics lab. It could be, there's a whole institute dedicated to leather research. So similarly, when I was traveling somewhere in Himachal, I saw a pig research institute. So you name an object or a creature, and there's probably a research institute connected to it. So we started going to these places and seeing whether, are there women working there? And we found that there were so many women. Of course, it is still a minority, but India is a huge nation and we have thousands and thousands of scientists. So if you take absolute number, there are enough women scientists. So we started interviewing these women and writing about them on our website. So I'm going to be just introducing you to a few of these people, but because I know you've had a long day, I want to make it super interactive. So what I'm going to show you is these images. So I want you to select which one you want me to talk about, but you also have to guess what area of research or what type of scientist could be studying something related to these images. I'm just going to choose the one I hear loudest. Oh, C got, okay, it looks like it's between A and C. So before, it's between A and C. So before I started, I got some volunteers and Danya, is that your name? Yes, okay, so she agreed to be a volunteer. So Danya, can you maybe you can discuss with your schoolmates and choose between A and C, which got the loudest? I want to hear her. Yeah, you can encourage her. Okay, shout. Choose. You're the boss, you're the boss. Choose. Come on, you're the boss, Danya. Okay. Any guesses what C is? Huh? Dentist? Bad teeth? Okay, but look closer at the picture. What kind? This person looks very happy to have bad teeth. What do you think gave him these bad teeth? Okay. It's actually, let's see. Have you heard of betel nut and, yeah, pan and all of that? So that was the answer. So before I go to the scientists, let's just see if you can guess what A was. Okay, okay. And what about B? Is it a... Okay, we'll come back to this if we have time. Anyway, for now, C. So C is actually a cancer biologist. So what does that picture have to do with cancer biology? So tobacco products, cause cancer, and betel nut and a lot of the things that people are chewing and smoking have tobacco in them. So this Rosie Mundal is a cancer biologist based in Guwahati in Assam. So she studies a very specific kind of cancer which is called head and neck cancer. So actually head and neck cancer is a whole group of cancers. It's basically the cancers of anything that you can get on your head or your neck. So it can be nasal, it can be oral, it can be throat. So that area of cancers is grouped under this umbrella called head and neck cancer. So she got super interested in this because she comes from an area in Assam, which is in the northeast of India, where the culture of chewing tobacco is very strong. So much that if you go and visit somebody's house, she was telling me that they greet you with, pan and these things to chew. So it has been, she wanted to see, okay, since people are chewing tobacco a lot more here, are people in this area more susceptible to head and neck cancers? So she went through hospital records looking, and she found that indeed it is. There's a 33% incident rate of head and neck cancers in northeast India, and she suspected that it could be because of this particular habit. So, so what Rosie does is she doesn't really look for a cure for cancer, because you may know that cancer is curable nowadays. People get cancer and they get cured also, but the key, what do you think is the main difference between a person whose cancer can be cured and not? Exactly. So it has to be detected early. But the thing with our healthcare system is most doctors say that by the time the patients come, most of them don't even know what cancer is. They've just ignored their symptoms for so long that it's far too late. And it's also difficult to diagnose cancers at the earlier stage. So Rosie is trying to find out, develop new science that can help us detect cancer early. And how she is doing this is by looking at the DNA. So do you know about DNA? I mean, do you know DNA? Where do you find DNA? In your cells. In which part of the cell? Is there any other part of the cell which has DNA? Yes, yes. So Rosie looks specifically at mitochondrial DNA. So mitochondria is the part of your cell which produces all the energy. Okay, so that's where, I mean, it's one of the most important parts of the cell because that's where we get our energy from. And mitochondria has DNA, but the problem is it doesn't have some protective coating around the DNA that protects the DNA from damage. So that sometimes makes it more prone to DNA damage. So Rosie particularly looked at mitochondrial DNA and she's finding these things called biomarkers. Biomarkers are parts of the DNA which are likely to get mutated. And if you detect these mutations in a person, you can say that this person has a high likelihood of getting cancer. So this way, if we have a set of biomarkers that every doctor has, and you can take a blood test or whatever DNA sample from somebody and say that, okay, you have a 30% chance of getting cancer, then you can make sure that person takes extra care and lifestyle changes so that they can reduce the possibility of him or her getting cancer. So that is the work that Rosie is doing as a cancer biologist. Now, who wants to be the next volunteer to choose in case of a tiebreaker? Okay. This is your school, so you have to do teamwork, okay? Only if there's a tiebreaker. Hold on. Which one? A, B, or C? Now I'm hearing B. Everyone B. I think it was B, but let's leave it to the volunteers. What do you think? B. Okay, B. What do you think B is? Sorry? Lipstick. Okay. What's happening to the lipstick? So what does this mean? What do lipsticks have to do with science? Yeah. So you would be surprised to see how much science is there in cosmetics. We brush it away like, oh, makeup and, it's something that only girls do. But there's a lot of high-tech science involved in the development of cosmetics. So I'm going to take you to Sanju Nanda. She's a cosmetics scientist. I mean, it's not a field of science that you'll hear of, but she's basically a pharmaceutical scientist who now studies cosmetics. So what are cosmetics? Okay, so what makes something a makeup product? Like how do you know it's a makeup product and not a medicine? Yeah, so actually there's a very specific definition in, we have guidelines that the government has given. And for something to be branded a cosmetic product, it has to be something that is either poured, sprinkled, or sprayed. And their only things that they should do should either be cleaning, beautifying, or promoting attractiveness, however you define that. So it's not meant to cure anything. It's not meant to change your body in any way. And this is a very important definition because cosmetic companies don't have to have the same licenses that drug companies, medicine companies have to have. Medicine companies, you have to wait years for testing and all of that, whereas cosmetic people just get away with it. So it's a very important definition, and there are still loopholes in this definition because of which a lot of cosmetics that we get in the market today are actually altering parts of our body. You will see there may be some pH, so you'll see some, fairness creams or a lot of things that are actually causing some change in our body. But because they're cosmetics, they've just come into the market and you don't know how they've been tested, you don't know about the animal cruelty involved in these tests. So there's a lot of problematic aspects in India especially and in some other countries. So Sanju is doing a lot of work in this area. She travels, she's trying to make a set of guidelines that can tell, you know, when India should say, okay, like if a Chinese company is saying we want to sell our cosmetics here, she has to decide whether what are the scientific things that we can say that you can sell here, you cannot sell here. And she believes that we need to, just because we need to be a little more careful in the cosmetics that we are selling. So yeah, so she's, like I said, she's a pharmaceutical scientist. So what she's studying is the effect of these chemicals. All cosmetics, medicines have chemicals. So the effect, how they penetrate through our skin, for example, and what effects they're having in our body. So all of this she studies. So that is Sanju, and then we have one more page. Yeah. I was going to ask for volunteers. Okay, they raised their hands first, so they are the tiebreakers. Tiebreakers. Okay, now A, B, or C? C. Okay, I'm hearing C, B, and A equally. Please collaborate and break the tie. Have you collaborated? Are you all in agreement? Is the whole school in agreement? C, clear? Okay, C. If we have more time, we can do a few more because this is the last slide. C, okay, what are you seeing in C? Video game. So is there a scientist who studies video games? Is that important? What could be the use of video games other than making sure you don't study? Okay, so here, maybe this will surprise you, but Kavita Vemuri, who I met in Hyderabad, her lab is called Serious Gaming. And she's a cognitive neuroscientist. So when I walked in, I was wondering what is going on. Cognitive means something to do with the brain, neuroscientist, somebody who studies the brain, and her lab is called Serious Gaming. So it turns out what Kavita does is study the science of empathy. So empathy is a feeling, is an emotion. I'm sure a lot of you know. Yeah, it's something that makes us feel what somebody else is feeling. It's what makes us sad when someone else is going through something. Even if it's not happening to us, we feel affected, and that feeling is called empathy. So it sounds like something very abstract, something poetic, but there's science behind empathy because it's specific circuits in our brain that are making us feel this way. And there have been studies that have identified these circuits also. So Kavita is studying these brain circuits. And how do you study brain circuits is usually through this technology called fMRI. MRI you might have all heard of because it's used medically. fMRI is it's the same principle, functional magnetic resonance imaging. And so they connect a lot of wires to your head and they can see which parts of your brain are lighting up, are active at any point of time. So she wants to see what triggers our empathy, what is the difference between empathy, different types of people are feeling, things like that. And one set of experiments she told me about is she makes her subjects are usually students, so if you choose to study this, you might get to participate in such experiments. So she makes them watch movies, and you know, usually very sad movies or something that touches you on some level. And she sees while people are watching these movies, at what scenes are their empathy areas lighting up. And she also was interested, she told me that a lot of boys say that they come out of the movie and they say, it was fine, you know, it's fine, I didn't cry and all. And, but when she looks at the brain circuits, she sees that they are as emotionally affected as the girls, you know. So, I mean, this is not the crux of her study, but she told me this. So that is, and it's also interesting because she sees that very often we feel, you know, for example, today we hear a lot about about a lot of feelings of malice that people, a lot of division between religions or class or caste, we feel like sometimes we see rioting and all of these things which makes people feel like they're very different from each other. But when you look at the way their brains work, when you look at the way that I am feeling for somebody very different for me, for their pain, it really sort of unites. It shows that everybody is actually the same. Everybody is feeling, has empathy for everybody else. So she's also very interested in looking at these things. Another thing interesting is neuro-rehabilitation. So Kavita and her students, the Serious Gaming Lab, they make their own video games. The picture I showed you was one of her games. And these are meant for people who had some sort of a brain damage and who are recovering. It could be somebody who had a stroke. People who have strokes are often paralyzed and they have to go through physiotherapy and things for years and years before they regain motion. And it could also be people who had an accident and who have maybe one arm paralyzed or something like that. So she makes games for them. So instead of these boring physiotherapy things, which a lot of patients, she talked to doctors and found that patients are not doing this so well. Patients are not responding to these treatments. They leave off the treatment after, especially old people, after a few weeks. So she made these games with, it has motion sensors and all of these things, and it has points and lives, and it involves walking forward, and the game can detect, okay, the right leg has not moved for very long, and then it'll make some situation where you have to move the right leg, and a lot of different things. So this is called neuro-rehabilitation, and Kavita is doing this with video games. So this is the other thing. Now, depending on how much time we have, I can maybe do one or two more. Okay. Fine. So let's do another one. Okay. I actually heard A and B equally, but I think A is super interesting because you might not have heard of it. So let's go to A. So A, what does A look like? Painting. Give me the science angle. What research? Colors, okay. But think about why there are these two things that look similar. One is old, one is new, somebody said. Okay, have you ever thought, it's actually fake paintings and real paintings. There are famous paintings and you want to know what the original is, for example. So this is something that a field of science that I never knew existed. It's called archaeophotonics. It's a mix of archaeology, which I think you all will know, the study of old objects and archaeological remains, and photonics. Do you know what photonics is? Study of light. Yeah, you heard a talk on light today. So it's a mix of these two. So Surya is a scientist who studies archaeophotonics. So the thing about light, I think this might have come in your talk before, is that there are applications of light, especially lasers, which when lasers hit any material, it interacts with the material in some way and it produces a spectrum. You've heard of the rainbow, dispersion rainbow, and I don't know if you've already heard of the double slit experiment and all of that. But basically, if light hits a material, it creates a spectrum. And if scientists can analyze the spectrum, it can tell, they are able to tell what are the elements that are contained in any sample. What elements are contained in any sample. So this is the basic principle behind it, and it's called spectrometry, this procedure. So it can tell us so many things. You can imagine how useful it is. It can tell us something. If we have a sample of a meteor or a comet, it can tell us what are the elements that are contained there. If we give it a sample of our food, we can see if it has any harmful preservatives. And so it has tons of applications. But now it has this newer application where archaeologists started becoming interested in photonics. Archaeologists started going to scientists who worked with light and said, okay, help us out. We have these archaeological samples which come from hundreds, sometimes thousands of years ago. And we want to find out what they are made of. But why are they interested in talking to, in photonics is because when you have a really old sample, like a fossil, say, it's not so easy to test it in the lab. You don't want to break it. You don't want to damage it. It's often very delicate and any contamination can harm. You don't want to get a rock from the moon and then contaminate it with our bacteria and say, oh, the moon has life, right? So these are important things. And photonics, because it's just laser, there's very little contact. There's very little damage. So that's why archaeologists thought that, okay, maybe we can look here. So what Surya sometimes does is she gets samples from archaeologists who tell them that, okay, I want to find out, here's this painting. This person is trying to sell it to me saying it's from the Chola dynasty. Can you help me? Can you think how photonics can help? How? You have a spectrometer and I'm giving you a painting and asking you to find out, is this originally from the Chola dynasty? Okay, but age, can I tell age? It can tell you what it is made of. Huh? Spectrometry cannot do that. All it can tell you is what it contains. Exactly. So sometimes you can tell that these pigments are there in this painting, but we already have this information that this pigment called so-and-so was only developed in the 17th century. So if it is there in this painting, you know that it cannot be from the Chola dynasty, right? So that is one way you can find out. Similarly, there's a lot, we can also do a lot of research about the technologies that existed in that area. If they tell that, okay, this sample has this type of iron in it, we can deduce that iron oring was, or this technique of iron oring was done in this period. And we can, and this way a lot of things have been found out that India was actually way ahead in terms of metallurgy than anywhere in the world. Today we think of the US and Europe as ahead of us, but thousands of years back, we were way ahead of them. So these all discoveries have come because we have traced these kind of history using science. Meena, you'll stop me? Bina? Okay. Okay. So this is it. I hope you liked the talk. And so this is my website. It's called thelifeofscience.com. And it has interviews, comics, videos, podcasts, everything with all different kinds of scientists describing what they've done and also the challenges they've had. And it might also help you dispel some myths about what you think being a scientist is about. And some people think that being an engineer is better only because it's easier or the money is more. But maybe if you read some of their stories, you'll see that there are different kinds of lives that scientists have, and just because you're a girl, it need not be that you cannot do certain things that you might be hearing you cannot do. So yeah, go to the website and read the stories, and I also want you to go to your teacher and look at a very special calendar that they've given all of them to take back to your schools. It's a calendar for the rest of the year featuring women scientists from India doing different kinds of things. Some of them I talked about here, but there are a lot more in the calendar. So please look at it from your teacher. Thank you.